Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This is Thursday, the 28th of March, 2013. As members of the public and members of this committee know, this meeting was already scheduled for tonight. I have received a number of representations concerned about the fact that once again this council is holding a council meeting on Maunday Thursday when many good people have other things to focus upon, not only just Easter, but also the fact they wish to be with their families over the bank holiday weekend. So can I apologise, although I don't accept responsibility for it, but apologise for bringing you out here at this time, because I'm sure that despite the fact that the issues we're going to discuss are very important to you, you probably would have preferred to be with your families and discuss this at another time when your families and your duties to them weren't so pressing. Unless Councillor Mitchell wants to say anything directly about it, because he did ask.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm sorry to take up time on this, but we did have a similar incident to this about 3 years ago, and I raised the question at the time. I don't believe it's right that the council should schedule meetings of any kind in the evening on the eve of a major bank holiday weekend. And in this particular case, when it's also a school holiday period, I think it's unfair on our officers that they're asked to be detained here when they should have been at home. It's unfair on members to call us out. It make it very easy to say I couldn't be available, then some other member would have to be here. But it's unfair on members of the public to have to be here on this occasion. And I just want to make a formal request now, for the record, that the council does not schedule meetings on the evening before a bank holiday. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell, I'm going to support that, and I hope that the officers have taken that on board. Members of the public, can I just tell you where the fire evacuation facilities are, or whatever you want to call it, the exits? Through that door, out, down the stairs and in the park, or that door there if you happen to suddenly be up here. I have to receive apologies for absence, and are there apologies for absence? Has anyone told me what they are? Do we have any apologies for absence? No. Then the next resignations and replacements. I am aware of some resignations and replacements, partly due to the business of tonight and partly due to some people being away. Councillor Keith Watts has been replaced by Councillor Eric Dunlop. Welcome. Councillor Mrs. Cubitt has been replaced by Councillor Ian Tilbury, and we hope your eyes will keep up with us, and if any stage you want us to rest or you want to rest, let us know. And Councillor Shaw will be replaced by Councillor Mrs. Baker. Welcome again. I think I've hopefully covered it. Oh yes, I should tell you all. This meeting is being webcast. Is it being webcast? Good, it is being webcast. And are there any declarations of conflict of interest or whipping decisions anyone wants to announce? No. Good. Urgent items, I'm told none. First item is to consider the minutes on paper A of the meeting held on the 12th of March. Can I formally move for the chair that are a correct record? Does anyone want to change, add, alter anything in relation to them?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Now, although the next item says member and public participation, that's going to be part of the procedure that we're going to have as part of this call-in. And so what I intend to do, members, is to remind you what the procedure is, because for various reasons we haven't had a call-in for a little while. And the public participation, as you see, will be at item 3. Shortly, I shall invite the portfolio holder to make an opening statement, which can be anything up to 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be particular. It doesn't have to use it all. He can take as long as he wishes, but within that 5 minutes. Then I will invite the spokesperson for the signatories, who I understand is Councillor Keith Watts. Is that right? And you're happy to be their spokesman tonight. Yes, he's indicated. To again have up to 5 minutes to explain why he feels it's necessary to not to call in so much, but what his concerns are and outline what his concerns are. I should say, of course, the Chief Executive has determined that this is a proper call-in, hence we're here. So the issue of why we're here is settled. We're here because the Chief Executive says there are matters that haven't been considered that committee should have considered, and any other reasons he gave for the call-in. So that isn't for debate. What is for debate is the material that we're going to look at. We've had some opening statements. Councillor Sherlock has provided a short document, and Councillor Watts has provided a short document. I hope all members have seen it. I have to say from the chair, I don't think either are particularly elucidating on what we're probably going to hear, but that's their choice, and there's no criticism intended. I will try and clarify what the call-in topics are, which will be, this is item 2, the idea being so that all members can focus their attention on those matters when they subsequently ask questions. And of course, when we look at debating this later on, we will be perhaps debating each of these topics in turn, making sure that we've given them a fuller airing. And it might be useful, it's a matter for the members of the public as to what they want to tell us in relation to these issues, but if you listen to the clarification of the topics, it might give you an idea of the issues that we've got to concern ourselves with later in the procedure, which will, therefore your contributions, as it were, can be focused on them. I have, I think, about 14 members of the public who want to address us. I shall be asking you to speak for up to 2 minutes. We've got a special gadget here, so I'll try and, if you see me going like that, that means sort of get to your end, all right? Because I know you've got a lot to say. I know that some of you have put written submissions in, which are always very much appreciated, and we will take some time at some point to read them during the course of tonight, or if this goes off. But as you know, if we have to keep things on track, and what we've found from experience is if you can't say it within 2 minutes, then you really haven't focused on what it is you need to say. So it's the whole idea is getting it focused, because a succinct point is the best one that we can then bear in mind later on. After that, the decision taker, item 4, will be asked if he wishes to give evidence himself about why he and subject himself to answering questions about it, and at the same time whether he wants to call any evidence, and then the spokesperson and possibly Councillor Shaw, and we'll let the Councillor Watts decide on that, may ask the decision taker questions and any of his witnesses, and we as a committee, after they've had their go, and each relation to each witness can ask the decision taker questions too. And then the position will then change, and we'll ask Councillor Watts if he wishes to call any witnesses, or whether he wishes to give evidence himself, or Councillor Shaw does, and then the portfolio holder to begin with, and then us as a committee can ask him and his witnesses, each of them in turn, questions to get to the bottom of the points that they wish to make about this as well. And then we will, as it were, allow a short winding up speech from each side, firstly from the spokesperson, Councillor Watts, or Councillor Shaw, should he wish him to do it, summing up the key points he wishes us to focus on, and then we'll have the portfolio holder winding up in the same way. And then we'll begin a debate. And our decision tonight can be a choice. We can support the called-in decision. We can amend the called-in decision. We can reject the call-in decision. We have it within our power to send the decision to full council, or alternatively send it directly back to the, and I'm saying this more for the benefit of the committee now, obviously, we have the choice of sending it to full council or to send it back to the portfolio holder. But whatever we do, it is ultimately the portfolio holder's decision. So we could send it to full council where they can have a good old discussion of it. I don't know whether it's going to be during the mayor making or the selection meeting or sometime in June, but whenever it's going to be, or a special full council at public expense, if it was to go that route. But in any event, whatever full council decided, it would still be the cabinet members' decision at the end of the day. Or we could decide that it's best sent directly to the cabinet member. The committee should note that the Secretary of State's guidance is that unless the decision is contrary to the policy and budgetary framework, which is the current policy and budgetary framework, we really shouldn't be sending decisions like this off to full council for them to debate. But it's open to us to do it, to ignore that guidance if we choose to do so. So I'll let you as a committee decide that when we get to that, if we get to that later tonight. But that's the sort of ambit we've got, or the direction we've got to get to at some future point. And I'll just turn over the page of page 11 of 154. I hope, therefore, members, you're all familiar with where we're going, the route ahead, and I think I should begin by asking at, as it were, item 1.1, unless there's any questions from any members. It's always fatal to ask. Good. That I will ask the portfolio holder, Councillor Sherlock to make his opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I do recognise that the methodology that we have used in our calculations has not been discussed in committee. Sites have. But I was very surprised to receive this call-in notice for two reasons. Firstly, I can't now recall the number of times Councillor Watts has said that Whitchurch could take, or needed, or wanted more housing to satisfy a natural increase in population size. I agree that Councillor Watts has never at any time mentioned a number or a percentage, but Councillor Watts certainly encouraged the idea that Whitchurch could take more housing, and that got us thinking, to which I will return later. But secondly, and more importantly, this call-in is premature. We have repeatedly said that at the moment there is nothing set in stone, nothing has been finalised, no decision has been made as to the total number of homes or sites. We are still waiting for further information from the census, hopefully due in late April, which may affect the overall numbers anyway. It is still work in progress. We are exploring all the facts and figures. We need to look at all areas in the borough with a view to ensuring that infrastructure could be properly in place to enable the Cabinet to come to a meaningful conclusion. As you know, the mantra on everyone's lips has been infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. And we have clearly stated that we are determined to ensure this is properly accounted for, and that is why officers are carrying out a massive amount of work to assess this, both for sites thus far and for backup sites to enable Cabinet to finalise these. Whilst on the subject, I'd like to acknowledge the massive amount of work that the officers are carrying out doing this. I would like to remind you of some major key points, and this is where our fresh thinking arose to which I referred earlier. Resident surveys have consistently called for development to be spread more equally across the borough. The north and east has borne most of the brunt of recent development. I happen to think it is very important to consider the percentage build in various parts of the borough. We need to consider whether it is fair or not. More importantly, our residents across the borough need to feel confident that we have been diligent in our considerations. Previously, allocations appear to have been done on an ad hoc basis, and I consider therefore that the application of the formula that we have used is both innovative and just. Therefore, I now put forward this formula as part of the consultation exercise to be considered along with other proposals. Our residents expect us to be fair and objective, and after all, the judicial review reminded us of that. And furthermore, natural justice demands we be impartial and fair. No settlement, no area, no village, no town, no parish, no neighbourhood should be excluded from this consultation, and that is why we have also recommended that the settlement boundary policies be reviewed. For instance, Kingsclear has literally no more space to build, and a review may enable us to see if we cannot release some more space. The only real exception to all of this is Tadley, which we all know is because it is subject to the Office of Nuclear Regulation. With regard to the selection the Cabinet made, the decision not to fully accept the officer recommendation and just made 3 adjustments. As far as the Whitchurch sites are concerned, all 3 are Category 1 sites, whereas places like Oakley have none. I'm a little unsure of what little 2 in the call-up submission is, and where it says no data has been cited to support the assertions, etc. It doesn't make much sense to me. However, you now have in front of you facts and figures to support the formula. So far, there has been no commitment to build more or even underbuild against the average head of population. But we do have the statistics, which if we don't make them public for consideration, someone else will.
Councillor Sherlock, you've had your 5 minutes. Can you concluding sentence, please?
Are the 3 signatories of this call-in telling me that I shouldn't take account of this formula relating to the percentage against head of population to help me to come to some sort of conclusion? Because after all, this committee has made no recommendations as to sites, whatever, and we have been left to do it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Keith Watts, will it be you? And if it is you, tell me when you're ready, and Councillor Miller will switch on the button.
Okay, thanks from the time buttons. Yes, I shall take less than 5 minutes. The amendment to the recommendation for strategic sites that came in a week before the Cabinet meeting and was carried by the Cabinet is a method that's not used elsewhere in the borough, and the result across the borough is consequently unsound. The recommendations of the officers are based on a clear bottom-up method and should be endorsed. The recommendation not to use neighbourhood planning for local decision on sites is contrary to the localism agenda and undermines this council's commitment to that. And so I will propose at the end of this session that the original recommendations from the officers be continued with the addition of the application of neighbourhood planning in Overton. Now, that was all I was going to say, but I must correct a factual inaccuracy in what Councillor Sherlock said. It's friends here from Whitchurch strongly oppose my view that has been put in thousands of leaflets and spoken in many meetings here, that the correct rate of growth for Whitchurch in the next 15 years is 25 dwellings a year, 350 houses over 15 years. The method of which that was derived is consistent with the proposals that I put forward for the borough as a whole, but I didn't commit myself to a number for the borough as a whole because I felt expertise was needed to feed in the needs of affordable homes. But that isn't correct. And as it happens, using a different rigorous method, the officers came up with 345. And when we're thinking over 15 years with all the variables, 345 and 350 are roughly the same thing. So that, I'm sure the long-serving members of this committee do remember that I have said that and supported it. And when it came up in the officer report this time, my only comment on the report was I agree with the officers. So let's, I think the call-in notice speaks for itself, and the witnesses will say better than me what we're trying to do.
Councillor Watts, thank you. It's my task now to summarise what the issues are, and I hope I will summarise them fairly. It's right to say, and I say this for the benefit of the other members of the committee and the public listening, that we had a brief discussion a week or so ago between myself, some of the officers, and the portfolio holder, and Councillor Watts and Councillor Shaw, to discuss what we thought the relevant issues would be tonight. And so I'm basing this on some of what you've said and some of what's in the paperwork of the call-in application. And it would seem that the areas are these: the suitability for selection of Whitchurch 10A and Whitchurch 18 based upon this new criteria that I say new because it's accepted, it hasn't been discussed at this committee before, which was applied on these sites but appears not to have been applied elsewhere on other sites in the borough. And obviously that can be unpacked a little bit, but that's the broad theme: the suitability of these sites being put forward based upon this new criteria, which appears not to have been applied elsewhere in the borough. The secondly is the increase of homes in Whitchurch to 500 has not been discussed at this committee. Councillor Watts, I think the members of this committee will agree with Councillor Watts. The number of 350 was in the topic of conversation, whether it was on our lips or not. It was in our papers, and we knew that's what was the officers was talking about, that figure. The call-in also refers to the dismissal of the neighbourhood planning efforts of Whitchurch by the portfolio, effectively making a decision regardless. I hope Councillor Watts, firstly, is that a fair summary, just to sort of keep us focused on the topics?
Yes, I'm content with that, Chairman, but the rejection of neighbourhood planning goes farther than that. It's cast out on the whole method for making local decisions.
And Councillor Sherlock, are you content that that's a fair summary of the issues?
Yes, Chairman. Thank you.
I now move, therefore, to ask members of the public and any visiting councillors to address us. I will do my best to take a short note of what each of you will be saying. If you have, if you're going to come and address us, will you begin by, I'm going to start with Shelley Gibb so that she can make her way up here. And when you come up, will you identify yourself, say where you're from? You don't give you your full name and a full address, but just say, you know, Whitchurch. I suspect one or two people might be from Overton. And if you are a representative, such as a parish councillor or something like that, or have some title, then please do tell us. And if there's a particular issue you want to tell us that I'm going to be talking about this issue, well, then do tell us, and then we'll start the clock so that you get all the preamble out the way and don't waste time on that. So, Shelley Gibb.
Yes, I'm Shelley Gibb. I've lived in Whitchurch for the last 14 years. I have no political affiliation whatsoever. I have no vested interests in this, no investments, but I'm a concerned local resident. Okay. I don't think many people in Whitchurch are against perceived progress. However, we acknowledge that there is local need for housing, but the local need is not for 550 homes. The proposed 550 homes would increase the population of Whitchurch by over 30%. The town infrastructure simply would not support this. We've already talked about roads and sewerage and all those things. I'm a mother of 2 small children at the primary school. Currently, they cannot fit all the pupils into the school hall. Yes, you can build extra classrooms, but how do you get there? Parking's already a problem, especially the access on Mitcheldever Road. My concern particularly is the development of the site known as Whitchurch 18, where access would be off Winchester Road through demolition of a house. This site actually is quite a considerable distance from the centre of the town. I don't believe that the people that would possibly live there would use the facilities within the town because it could be considered too far to walk. One of the reasons for choosing Whitchurch as, well, this sneaky chuck in an extra 200 homes while nobody's looking, has been justified by the location of the mainline railway station. Actually, it's too far. I think most people would not walk from Whitchurch 18 to the railway station, which gives us further traffic problems and increased pressure on already limited parking. I'd like to take this opportunity really to urge the members to be objective, to put aside their own NIMBYism and vested interests, and make a decision that is right for the borough, but for the community of Whitchurch. Thank you.
Well done. I should say to members of the committee, the signatories and the portfolio holder, for that matter, have the option of calling members of the public as witnesses, and then we can get to question them. But some, and I know one or two have moved between the two categories, but we're not going to give members of the public questioning because they're not here for a grilling. They haven't come for a grilling, and obviously if one person starts asking from one point of view, another will have to ask from another. It's not fair, and they know they're going to say their piece, and then listen. So there'll be no questions to members of the public. Obviously, it doesn't preclude them putting out bits of paper to us if they think there's more points they want to make. Can I just ask the officers, before we go on to the next speaker, do we have a map? Because we did when we were at the committee, which looked at the other sites within Whitchurch, but it doesn't seem to be in the cabinet papers, and I think it's very important that we see where Whit 18 is and Whit 10, if that's the other one is. No, well, the papers in the call-in don't seem to have them, but they were before the committee when we were last here. Yeah. Can we just right? Can we have have we got an officer who can point to where Whit 18, or perhaps Councillor Watts, would you point to where Whit 18 is and Whit 10 are? Because I know you know where they're all portfolio, one of you, because I know we've seen them. I know that one's round here and one's round here, but and one is, well, those are the other ones, but one. Well, just stand up. Just point to the page in the thing, and we'll see where they are, and then we'll get the maps individually. Because I think it's very important we know exactly where the members of the public are talking about, because there might be a distinction between the two sites which they're trying to bring to our attention. Yes, me.
Thank you. Well, members, the committee members are over there anyway, so this is Whitchurch, this is the A34 trunk road, and here is the railway line. We have accepted and agreed that two sites, sorry, Whit 006 and Whit 007 are here off Blosswood Lane. We're not challenging that allocation. Over here is Whit 10A, right there. Whit 18 is here south of our secondary school and extends along this way and down there.
South of Central.
Yes, that's right, south of...
Thank you very much, Councillor. Has anyone seen where that is? Councillor Watts? Peters, please. Once again, feel free to tell us who you are, which particular parish you're from, and anything that about you think might be relevant, and then get going. We'll press the buzzer when you start.
Julie Peters, I'm a concerned resident of Whitchurch. I've just got something to read, if that's... Firstly, I believe 350 houses in Whitchurch over the next 15 years will be too many, and 550 will destroy our community and completely change the character and the feel of the town. I feel more information should have been given as to why the decision was made, in particular, a detailed breakdown of all settlements in the borough with housing and population numbers, not just over the last 10 years, but since the last plan was put in place, showing why this criteria is being applied to Whitchurch and Overton. I also don't understand the removal of the location of houses in the later phase of the plan being decided through local determination, as this takes away the right for a say on the most important aspect of planning. I firmly believe that these decisions should be made by those who have to live with the consequences and who know the town best. An example of this is that Whitchurch has the thought that Whitchurch has a well-developed centre, with a good mixture of shops, businesses and transport links, and is better able to cope with this additional number. But in reality, over the last couple of years, businesses have closed, including our last remaining bank, and more jobs are being lost than created. On a Sunday, there are now only 4 buses in either direction to Basingstoke or Andover, and trains only run every 2 hours. On-road parking means every road leading into the centre becomes single file, with it becoming gridlocked and cars having to make pavements to get by, and I don't think it would be possible to change the road layout there. The majority of houses now being proposed on WHIT 10A and 18, the farthest point from the station, means that people driving through the town to get there, as they won't walk the 20 minutes plus, especially in winter. Please, therefore, do not go ahead with these decisions and listen to the people of Whitchurch who have signed petitions both in the 48 hours leading up to the Cabinet meeting and currently online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaker is Dr. Richard Waldron, please. Again, I leave it to you to adopt the same procedure.
Thank you, councillors. I'm a resident of Overton. The original estimate of 594 houses per year for the borough was solely through natural increase, the difference between births and deaths. Yet the predictions for Overton to 2018 are that population will not rise at all by natural change. Another strand in the predictions is that household size has been falling across the borough. The assumption is that it will continue to fall, which means more houses. Not so in Overton, where household size has remained stable between 2001 and 2011. All this information comes from links which are on your own website. We think you are wrong to apply borough averages equally. It is neither equitable nor sensible to build houses in Overton to satisfy demand arising in Basingstoke. And it also means you won't have enough in Basingstoke town. Your adopted vision talks of new homes for local needs and enhancing the character of our villages, but that is not what you're proposing at all. Overton does need affordable homes for Overton people in housing need. The developers say they can only build 40 affordable houses if they are allowed to build 60 unaffordable houses as well, and the planners have accepted that without question. But there are small, standalone, affordable housing schemes, which are also on your website. How come they are not even mentioned in any of the documents before you? 224 such homes have been built under the Rural Exceptions Scheme across Hampshire. The central government now requires you to factor in growth from net inward migration on top of natural growth in your predictions, raising the figure from 594 houses to 770 per year. 213 houses were built in Overton over the past 10 years, so our population grew by inward migration. This requirement means that the more houses you build in one period, the greater the predicted need, in inverted commas, will be for the next period, ad infinitum. If policy does not change, Overton will eventually become the size of Birmingham. Could you kindly point that out to your masters in Whitehall? Thank you.
The next is John Buckley, please.
Put round, and I don't want members not to listen to you properly. Yes, Mr. Buckley, same preamble. Just tell us about anything you want to say first, and then we'll off you go.
Good evening. John Buckley, resident of Whitchurch. Yeah. So Basingstoke councillors are to increase the number of houses proposed for Whitchurch by over 60%. Many have already covered the present lack of plans for related infrastructure, and you mentioned it yourself at the beginning of the meeting. Worse though, there's no evidence of any consultation or detailed assessment of needs having been carried out. I'll just focus on one issue: the increase in road deaths and injuries that will surely be caused if you push through with these proposals. Whitchurch and Overton are joined by a single stretch of B classified road, well known for its dangers. A Hampshire County Council's recent review of A and B roads has recently determined that the B3400 was the third worst road in Hampshire for the number of collisions per kilometre. It was also found to be the worst in your own area, Basingstoke and Deane. The route will soon have the new distillery with 100,000 visitors a year, its associated lorry and coach movements, and tourism being promoted nationally. It's a prime route for travel to the Whitchurch schools, and in particular to Tesbourne from Oakley and especially Overton. And there's presently no safe cycling or walking provision. Whatever happened to safe routes to school in Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council? Leisure development has been focused on Basingstoke, with council officers coming to Whitchurch and openly admitting at a meeting that the town has been left behind. So how do Whitchurch residents reach these leisure centre facilities? By the B3400. As an example of how our representatives think about sustainable development, let's see how much has been spent in the last 10 years on cycling walking facilities in the Whitchurch area. An FOI revealed the grand total of a 0. No wonder it's the worst road in the borough. And by increasing the housing numbers, you want to increase the amount of travel on this road to even greater levels. That's short-sighted, shallow thinking, and makes me question the real motives which seem biased towards developers against the places and the people and where they live. I'm sure these motives have been talked over, especially, perhaps informally, amongst the many developer and financial clients that our Councillor Sherlock's company entertains. Whatever happened...
Bring you up at that point. Firstly, because I've let you go on for 45 seconds, and secondly, we're not here to have a go about individual members or anything like that. So if you've got a problem with anything, you put in a formal complaint, and I don't think... just sound as though we're going down a path we don't need to go. This is about evidence gathering, and I'm going to draw you to a close right now. Thank you very much. Can we have the next speaker, please? Steve Clemson, please. That Mr. Clemson has very kindly written a letter to all of us, so I dare say we'll cast our eyes over it and listen at the same time, and if we get a moment we'll look at it in more detail in due course.
It's 4 pages.
Yes, so we'll probably listen more than read.
Yeah,
okay, Mr. Clemson, same introductions if you want to introduce yourself.
Steve Clemson, living in Whitchurch since '95.
And just to be minded, red light means stop. I should say that because a number of people have gone on for a good half a minute or more. Well, I don't like bringing people up to a halt.
I'll rattle through it very quickly then. Okay. Mr. Chairman, BDBC have increased the number of houses from 350 to 550 in Whitchurch, using the national average house occupancy of 2.4 people. This is likely to mean a population increase of 1347, which is a rise of 28%. On what evidence are BDBC basing this requirement? Will all towns across the borough be getting a 28% rise in population? If so, can you confirm that Basingstoke are building houses for 25,000 people within Basingstoke town before 2029? If not, why not? At the meeting on February the 25th here, people were saying build what was originally agreed in the last SHLA on the agreed sites. I do not understand why the councillor summing up that meeting interpreted what was said as no more houses. We're keeping to what was agreed, so why aren't BDBC? There has been no consultation with the town. This is not fair and not democratic. The 200 increase will be built on Whit 18 to the east of Winchester Road. The site was rejected in the 211 SHLA, I quote, development of the site will extend the town unnecessarily into the open and attractive countryside, and the scale of development would be inappropriate to Whitchurch. Why is this site now suitable? On what basis was this decision made? Building on this site opens up the real possibility of a vast development of the adjacent Whit 17, which comprises some 82 hectares, which according to the government housing density recommendations will be space for up to 4,100 houses. It's the developer's dream. If built, you can say goodbye to the Whitchurch we know. Finally, we have to ask ourselves what type of country we're trying to build. Is it a series of new towns with inadequate facilities, or is it better to centralise development in areas which have those facilities already? And just why are we trying to urbanise the countryside? Bigger is not always better. Thank you.
Mr. Clemson, thank you very much, and lots of good points made succinctly. Thank you. Within
And read
time.
the letter,
Yes.
because that expands on it. And it's got
Well,
lots
members,
of
shall we
stuff,
pause for a moment and just cast our eyes over the letter, because I think that would do justice to the speaker.
especially about traffic movement.
Yeah. Well, we're going to look at the letter.
Is there by any chance a spare copy of the letter, Chair? Oh, okay.
Point out to members, they'll see that under paragraph 3 of the letter, there is a distinction between what that member of the public, Mr. Clemson, thought about WIT 10A compared to WIT 18. The next speaker is, I hope members, have you members you broadly finished? Is there a nod? Councillor Tilbury? How are you doing? Can I carry on? Councillor Mr. Baker? Can I carry on? All right, members? Okay. The next speaker is Nick O'Brien, please.
Good evening. My name is Nick O'Brien. I've lived in Whitchurch for 4 years now. I'm increasingly concerned about the ability of Whitchurch to support such a large increase in population size over the next 15 years, whether in the previous proposal for 350 houses or the recent proposal for 550 houses. To give you a few specific examples about my concerns. Firstly, why have both local schools had their capital budgets cut by 20 to 30%, I imagine by Hampshire County Council, when the school age population in Whitchurch is due to greatly increase? Secondly, why has the ticket office at Whitchurch railway station had its hours cut and the train service reduced? Have South West Trains and Network Rail been informed about the possible future increase in population? Thirdly, what action is being taken to encourage new shops and local business startups? Have initial talks taken place with other organisations? for example, local enterprise agencies. It's not clear to me that any such discussions for improved facilities have even begun. Unfortunately, the build it and they will come approach to providing facilities for new housing does not work, as we've seen across the region. The Borough Council cannot, of course, provide many of these facilities, but I do expect the Council to work with the organisations who can, and with the people of Whitchurch through a detailed neighbourhood plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien. The next speaker is Maureen Cady.
Good evening. Maureen Cady, a resident of Whitchurch. I do not feel enough reason has been given for raising the proposed housing number in Whitchurch to 550, as it is totally inappropriate number for this rural and market town. I believe the reasons given are not sufficient enough to justify taking away so many of our green fields, hedgerows and wildlife, or why the majority of development of 400 houses is planned south of the river, as the land required will take development outside the local planned boundaries, thereby setting a precedent for building on high-grade agricultural land and creating an urban sprawl. Has enough consideration been given to our already struggling infrastructure, which without major financial contribution to improve it will not cope with 350 homes, let alone 550? We have been led to believe that we would have a say through a neighbourhood plan on the allocation of homes in the latter phrase, and in my opinion, the removal of this could potentially result in the wrong sites being developed. I feel this may be the case with the naming of 200 dwellings on Whitchurch 18, and in particular the proposed access road being created by demolishing number 123 Winchester Road. I live at 121, with the boundary of 123 only 8 foot away from my home, and at no point has anyone visited myself or the surrounding properties to consider the enormous detrimental effect on our standard of living due to the noise and pollution, and not to mention the terrible invasion of privacy by people walking or driving past, or how sufficient screening could be put in place while still allowing enough room for pedestrian and two-way traffic. I feel this is the sort of thing that could be considered in more detail through a local neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next witness is Stephen Nielsen, or next public speaker, I should say. Introduce yourself, Mr. Nielsen.
Right, my name's Stephen Nielsen. I'm a member of the Lib Dem Party, if that's of interest, but I live in Whitchurch, and I've done for the past 16 years. In fact, I live very close to the Blosswood site for development, which I believe is not in question anyway. But, my pure objection to this is just pure numbers. Just one suggestion is that there's a lot of information down there, which I only just picked up as I walked in here. It would have been nice to have that, if it's possible to have that before, to give me a chance to read it before I sort of make my comments here, but obviously I've not read it all just yet.
Listen.
No, that's fine, yeah. Just if it's possible to have it in advance, it'd be helpful just to read it beforehand.
But if you want to go down the queue and read it and then come back to us.
That's fine.
Okay, Karen.
Okay, yeah. Rather than repeat what's already been said, just reduce my sort of comments down to just a few points, is that I find that the number of 550 houses in Whitchurch is really disproportionate to the number of houses being built elsewhere, and I wonder why that is. We seem to in Whitchurch have done the maths and come up with a number of 350 houses that need building in Whitchurch, and all of a sudden, without too much explanation of why the figures are there, we seem to have increased to increase by another 200. And also sort of object to the imposition being put on the people of Whitchurch, and that this has just come out of the blue very, very quickly, and it wasn't very well announced. Not many people in Whitchurch know about this yet. And I really do hope that this is not written in stone, that this is up for negotiation and can be something can be done about it. And that's all. Thank you.
That's very kind, thank you. The next speaker is Andrew Reeves Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. My name's Andrew Reeves Hall. As you can tell from the accent, I live in the northern part of Whitchurch. I've lived there for about 10 years. The number of houses proposed for Whitchurch unexpectedly jumped from 350 to 550. There was no forewarning or any evidence of a democratic process, let alone bottom-up methodology to justify this. Places such as Bramley, which is of a similar population to Whitchurch, were mooted for 200 further houses because they already had seen 337 new homes built in the last 10 years. As one witness said to you on the 31st of January, that's too much, too fast, and without proper consideration. Yet for Whitchurch, building 200 further houses is acceptable? New housing, I feel, should go to the periphery, the so-called outlying areas of the town. And the central part of Whitchurch, including the land east of the Knowlings, which you know is Whit 010A, should, in my opinion, be a hub for community activities, what I call the 3 S's, shops, schools, and sports. Councillor Golding demanded at the February meeting for more golf courses to be built. I remind him that the Basingstoke and Dean told Whitchurch residents last May, quote, "For certain facilities and certain sports, there is a deficit towards the west, and that is something that we need to look at," end quote. The Whit 10A land, which is next to the council's Queen Elizabeth II field, should be used to create an Olympic legacy sports area that is accessible to all members of the community, young, middle-aged, and the elderly. Let's end on this point. I was shocked to hear the chairman at the meeting last month summarize the meeting by stating, quote, "We try and do the best that we can in an honest way." If you listen to it and going through my notes, what you find is that everybody has managed to put forward a very coherent argument for not developing on any of the sites at all, anywhere, end quote. This statement was not at all in line with the witness statements I heard, because I was here, and he made it just before the vote, which I feel may have influenced the outcome.
Thank you. The next member of the public is Mr. Stevens.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Stevens. I'm a resident of Whitchurch and have been for the past 18 years. And I agree wholeheartedly with the comments that have gone before me with regard to opposition to a further 200 houses being developed in Whitchurch. And I would just like to add my points to this gathering. So my 2 minutes starts now. I understand that more houses are required in Hampshire, and also that Whitchurch is targeted as a development area for building more houses over the next 15 years. However, there are important issues to be overcome before attempting to add a further 200 houses to this already struggling community. By struggling, I mean amenities, transport, parking, healthcare and schooling. Whitchurch has 5 roads converging on its centre, all of which are very narrow and all allow on-road parking for roadside residents. To drive through the town on any school morning or afternoon between the hours of 8:15 and 9 and 3:30 to 4:15 is utterly chaotic, with traffic piling up from every direction, cars mounting the pavements and no one going anywhere. The roads cannot be widened and there is no provision for off-road parking on any route. More housing on this enormous scale would just exacerbate this problem. Currently, to get an appointment with the local surgery, one can wait up to 2 weeks. More housing again would simply make this situation worse. badly lacking public amenities for children, with proposed increases in more houses again making the problem worse. 3 sites for children to play in Whitchurch. Schooling. It necessarily follows that more houses bring more families with more children. Whilst local schools currently manage, increases in this proposed level would stretch their capabilities just too far. Building 200 plus houses is going to be a future challenge to this small town, or 300, sorry, I beg your pardon. Building 300 plus houses is going to be a future challenge to this small town, with inadequate parking and poor transport access to deal with. Obviously, a great amount of thought must be given to any future development with the proper consultation. Very importantly, taking into account access to the railway station, the all-important railway station, and major trunk routes. However, to consider building a further 300 houses, sorry, a further 200 houses is pure folly. And I may just add, if I can, Whitchurch 18, it's already been mentioned, is outside the town boundary. It stands to gain the most houses and is furthest from the station. If you promote Whitchurch as a town that has mainline access to London, the station is the way to go, and access to the north. All these houses would have to go through the town to make access to the station, where there is obviously no parking, and would just exacerbate the problem of traffic going through the town. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Brian Langer, please.
Good evening. I'm a parish councillor at Overton, but submit this as a private individual. This entire process seems to have lacked proper consideration of some of the prime tenets of the adopted vision of the borough through to 2026, as in Appendix 1 of tonight's agenda. That statement states that it is the intention to create inviting places and communities where people want to live, feel they belong, and it is easy to meet everyday needs, where people can connect, enjoy their lives, get involved, creating a strong community spirit, and where new homes meet local needs and bring improved and new local services, where we enrich the different characters of villages and the countryside in the way we plan, and where the local built and natural environments are in tune and continue to provide opportunities for the economy and people's enjoyment. If the borough councillors really believed in that form of words, they would not be considering the sites being proposed for development in Overton as far as quantity of housing units is concerned, their impact on the services currently provided in the village, or the impact on the local environment. Overton has taken a considerable amount of new housing in the past 10 years and is no longer the place it was. There is no guarantee that the shops in the community currently relies upon will continue, as many are family or individually run. The one national chain which is in the village seems to have made an effort to buy up appropriate premises in order to prevent competition from coming into the main retail part of the village. The generation that did not need a car because the local mill provided employment is fading away, and the village's population is now very different to 20 or 30 years ago. Most people have access to cars, and if they cannot find what they want in Overton, will drive elsewhere. The degree of development proposed will not encourage the prosperity of the community, but will assist in smothering it. In the 3 meetings of this committee which I attended in February, very little was heard from the councillors as to how any of the proposed sites in the borough would impact on the environment. Overton has a strong sense of place, a community in the Upper Tess Valley surrounded by folds of hills, some of which have nationally designated significance. That sense of place is strongly manifested in the view of the church and the surrounding rural context seen on the approaches to the village from Basingstoke and Micheldever. To allow site OV007 to go forward for development would be to damage irretrievably that setting. Would a Winchester planner agree to housing on St Giles Hill, a favoured view from the High Street, just because it's available? I think not, and I think it is time that far more consideration is given by this council to environmental settings before even more damage is done to the landscape the councillors purport to cherish and support.
Mr. Langer, I'm going to cause you to stop because you've had 50 seconds more than the entitlement. I'm just waiting for you to get to pause for breath. Thank you very much. That was very clear. Just ask the portfolio holder, has anything happened about the Overton part of your decision that was changed? Because Mr. Langer has mentioned the Overton site.
Thank you, Chairman. Site 007, I said at the last P9 meeting, I think it was, is up for review, and we're just waiting for the assessments to come back from officers, and we will then make a decision. Thank you.
To be clear and helpful, can you just be clearer, because we had understood from our discussions, as in front of Councillor Watts and Councillor Shaw, that you were taking Site 007 out of your decision, having put it into your decision when you originally made it. Isn't that right, Councillor Watts? Yes, they're nodding.
It is my intention to recommend to the Cabinet that it is taken out.
I'm sure the residents from Overton will be pleased to hear that. So that the decision is changed to that extent. All right. So although you can continue to address us, the following people from Overton, can I say that 007 is no longer in the decision, or won't be? What we're told. And we won't be discussing it in specific terms before this committee. The next speaker is Kenneth Mackenzie.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Mackenzie and I'm speaking as Chair of Overton Village Design Statement Steering Group. I was referring originally to development sites OV007 Court Farm and 00400 and OV004 Tugate Meadow, but perhaps I'm only referring to one now. Thank you. Overton Village Design Statement was produced following widespread local consultation and makes specific recommendations which refer to both of these sites. From the VDS, I've selected some of the comments which were made, just to give you some example. For example, the open spaces around Court Farm, the old rectory and the Great North Field are particularly cherished for their scenic quality, and any development must respect this. Further building encroachment in skyline should be avoided. I beg your pardon. The impact of development on use of existing roadways and footpaths should be considered when planning applications are made. Development should be avoided where impact on the skyline would detract from views within the village. Both the proposed developments would have a major impact on the village. The former OV007 Court Farm by its proximity to St Mary's Church and Court Farm, and OV004 Tugate Meadow by its impact on development in the skyline, effects on traffic and road layout, and particularly road lighting issues due to its elevated situation. In addition, the proposed developments will put great strain on local infrastructure, especially sewers, roads and water supplies, all of which are over or at capacity. Finally, we're, I think, disappointed that the VDS recommendations have not been more fully taken into account in the planning process, and also disappointed that we are commencing a neighbourhood plan for Overton, and it would appear that that will not be able to have any impact on the decisions which we're making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, Peter Baker, please.
Hello, I'm Peter Baker from Overton. I've lived there since '99. I was initiated the Overton Business Association in the year 2000, and I want to make some general points. As a businessman, killing the golden goose is what is going to happen with the tremendous increase of the visitors, 100,000 a year to Laverstoke Mill, the extra houses and movement of traffic from Whitchurch and Pickett's Peace. because we have this medieval street system, I have customers come in my shop and say, it's taking me 20 minutes to park. I'm just about to drive out because I couldn't get a car parking space. And that is today, without this extra increase in traffic. So it's not going to do the local businesses any good at all, having this immense surge of traffic, because people have got to park. And we've been told very firmly by the Basingstoke canteen officers in the past, when the business association asks them to provide extra parking, no way are we going to buy development land for a car park. So forget it. So we're between a rock and a hard place, because we don't want our customers, and particularly my business, I get people from 20 and 30 miles away to come into my shop, driving to Overton and not being able to park. So as a business friendly Conservative councillors in particular, I think you've got to bear in mind that the local MP, Maria Miller, in October said she didn't want to see green fields built on. In the last fortnight, our own MP, Sir George Young, has written a very strong letter extolling the virtues of localism, and that local people should have the decision on their environment. So for those reasons, please take into consideration that Overton is a village 8 miles away from Basingstoke, and that we do not want to be a suburb for Basingstoke or commuter land for London. Thank you.
That is the end of the public participation part of our meeting. I should say, for the members of the public listening, this committee is made up on the basis of proportional representation of independent councillors, Labour councillors, Liberal Democrat and Conservative councillors, and I'm sure all of them are friendly to business, even if our policies differ on how friendly we want to be. So thank you, Mr. Baker. So we now move on to the next part, which is inviting the portfolio holder. I'll just remind members where we are on page 11 of 154. There's the decision taker's case. Can I invite Councillor Sherlock to indicate, is he going to call evidence, who it's going to be, or whether he's just going to give evidence himself? And over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I know I'm going to give evidence myself. I'm not going to call anybody.
Well, over you go. Tell us what you want to tell us, and then I'll invite the spokesperson for the signatories to go first and ask you some questions, and then we'll come to the committee. No, are you giving evidence? You're going to tell us why you made your decision? Okay, well, are there any documents you wanted to see as to the figures, or why you've... Yeah, well, have we got them? Can you just tell us what they are, to make sure we've all got them? Good. Yes. Well, okay, so you're relying on them. Do you want to explain them at all to us?
That might be helpful.
Yes. Is this what you're referring to?
That's the Hampshire County Council ones, and there is another one, a smaller one, headed Summary Data Table.
This?
Yes.
So it's there's two pages, saying page 1 and page 2, is that right? So are they the only two documents? They are. Do you want to explain them to us? It's up to you.
I think they're fairly self-explanatory, but the smaller one, mine aren't numbered. So the smaller one gives you the growth figures, percentages of the major settlements in the borough, and the underbuilding or the overbuilding that has taken place in the last 10 years. And then
what do you say it says, and why is that you've used that? Have you used that to formulate your decision?
Yes.
What do you say it says? so that the public want to hear. So can you tell?
Well, it says that Bramley had an overbuilding, Overton and Whitchurch had a much less one, and we're trying to average it out over the borough, over the various settlements.
I'm going to invite Councillor Watts to ask you some questions. All right, Councillor Watts, please do ask the portfolio questions. Can I just say about asking questions of, this applies to anyone that you may call Councillor Watts, it's obvious that we all ask questions in different ways. And I fully accept from as chairman that you may want to refer to a particular document or say, well, look, this says this and this, and haven't you heard government guidance says that and that and that? What do you think, or why have you made your decision? And I appreciate you may want to preface, but can I remind all of you, speeches are not for this part. Questions are trying to get some answers, and trying to get some facts together so that we can make some decisions later, and then we can make lots of long speeches. All right, so I will restrain you, but I understand that we'll do that approach just slightly differently. Okay, Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Mr. Sherlock, do you remember the last two public speakers over the three evening marathon meeting we had discussing these sites? There was one from Bramley and one from Overton. Well, let me remind you, one was speaking about OV007 and the other one was proposing that you take 200 houses away from Bramley and plant them in Whitchurch. And those are the only changes that you've recommended as a result of those whole 12.5 hours, 3 evenings. So I thought it was particularly interesting that those were the stars who impressed you.
Do you agree?
Well, yes, do you agree that they were the only changes you recommended arose from those two contributions?
Yes, I do, but I don't particularly recall them.
Remind you, Mr. Nason was very honest, said he's the owner of OV007. He was here to tell us that it could be developed on its own without the neighbouring site. Mr. Vaughan, former Councillor Vaughan, who lost his seat last year in the election, was here to say that Bramley, the settlement of Bramley, shouldn't have any additional houses at all, because we're dealing with settlements here, not parish boundaries, and said that Whitchurch and Overton have got lots of Category 1 sites, put the houses there. And that's what you've now proposed. Well,
is that right?
No. Bramley is still having new houses built on it. We took houses away from the north and east and put them into Overton and Whitchurch because the number of housings over the last 10 years is much less than Bramley, who's been overbuilt.
yes, I see. I mean, I'm drawing distinction between the settlement of Bramley and the parish of Bramley because the two sites in the south are categorised as attachments to the settlement of Basingstoke. Could I suggest that perhaps that visit to this committee was Mr. Vaughan's early bid for re-election? Well, next I was going to ask whether this is a shift of power from North West Hampshire to North East Hampshire. But it's the committee that's going to make a decision tonight. Well, I think the chairman is saying that he's made the decision on the basis of these facts here. Is there a reason why you didn't decide that Oakley and Kingsley on these figures should be getting additional houses?
Oakley has no Category 1 sites, whereas Whitchurch has, and Kingsclear, I mentioned earlier on in my introduction, has run out of space because of the settlement policy boundary. And that's why we're going to review them and perhaps make space.
I mean, the next question was, are you going to apply this last 10-year average across the whole of the borough?
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Oh, that will be interesting, but presumably we won't make further progress with the current draft until that's been done. Now, are you aware of the process for the examination in public that this local plan will have to go through later this year?
Yes.
Are you personally going to defend this method of calculating the allocation of sites at that examination in public?
It's not for me personally to do anything. I do follow cabinet decisions.
But who's going to speak for the cabinet on that?
Officers and myself.
But the officers recommended a different approach.
They may have done, but they will. That approach has been turned down by the cabinet.
Right, that's established. I think I've let you know. Are you aware that Whitchurch people will advise the inspector to find the plan unsound if these additional 200 houses are there?
That's right.
No more questions.
To Councillor Shaw, do you want to ask some questions of the portfolio holder?
Yes, if I may. Thank you, Chair. It's a number of questions, but I'll try and keep each brief and do one at a time, if that seems best. First of all, Councillor, can you just sort of clarify exactly what your decision has been? Because you made reference to there not being housing allocated in Bramley, but when I checked out the website of one of your councillor colleagues, his website says no homes in Bramley Village, no homes in Sherfield Village. Can you clarify that apparent discrepancy?
No, I haven't seen the website, but there are.
I'll pass you a copy. It's the website of Councillor Ranald Giles Wardener. Have you noticed that the words I mentioned are in fact on his website, and can you clarify that discrepancy?
No, I can't clarify it, and he can speak for himself, and I think you ought to ask him.
There were some papers handed round the committee recently, or just now, which was the map of the sites in Whitchurch, including those that you allocated for additional development, and the list of percentage growth over the past in various areas through the borough. Did you and did your cabinet colleagues have this information with them when they made the decision?
Yes.
Why was the information not available then to this committee and not included in the papers which this committee had a copy of, ostensibly as the papers that had been circulated at Cabinet?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Well, as I understand it, this committee has a complete set of the Cabinet papers. This committee hadn't had either the map or the table of percentage changes in population by area, and yet you're saying that the Cabinet did in fact have that information. So how did the Cabinet have that information if it was not in the Cabinet papers?
I'm perplexed.
Councillor Shaw, because there's two questions Councillor Shaw's asked you. First of all, if the Cabinet had the details which you've told us about that form their decision, how come it wasn't brought to this committee? That's the first question. The second question was, if the Cabinet had the papers, why isn't it in the Cabinet papers?
I don't know, I'm not aware.
Are you aware as a cabinet member that, councils, committees of this council, including the cabinet, are required, as I understand under law, to have the papers for their meetings available ahead of the committee meeting itself?
Yes, I am.
Isn't it then a matter of concern to you that you're not sure that the Cabinet in fact had those papers available?
Yes, it is.
Moving to the table that shows the changes in population over time, and I would imagine you have that in front of you as it has been passed around just now. Would I be correct in saying that actually that shows that the majority of settlements within Basingstoke and Deane have had population increases less than those experienced in Whitchurch?
I don't think so.
Well, let me help you, because at a quick glance, this sheet of paper probably shows in excess of 20 settlements listed, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And of those 20 or so settlements, there may be more than I don't know the precise number. The majority of those settlements have growth changes of 0%, 2.63%, 0.7%. Isn't that correct?
You can't judge every settlement against each other like that. That's taking a broad brush to some are different for various reasons.
But isn't that precisely what you're doing in your decision? Because you're saying that... because you're saying, aren't you, that the determinant of the appropriate allocation for Whitchurch ought to be based on the growth that it has had in the past relative to other areas? Why shouldn't the same apply to any other of the sites listed on your schedule, if that is your argument?
What we have said is that we will look at all the settlement boundaries, we will look at all the various settlements and apply the same thing to them and for the future.
So do I take that to mean that quite a few of these 20 or so settlements may have quite a significant level of growth of the kind envisaged for Whitchurch then?
Possibly, yes, probably.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. You referred in your remarks to, and you used the phrase underbuilding and overbuilding in relation to various areas. What criteria do you judge over or underbuilding against?
Councillor Shaw, I'm so sorry. I got distracted because a couple of members were distracting each other. Could you just repeat the question for my benefit, and hopefully they'll listen to?
By all means, Chair. The question was, what is the criteria that determines whether an area is judged to have experienced under or overbuilding? What is the objective criteria for that statement?
In other words, what you're asking is, if he's taking Bramley, Overton, Whitchurch, Tadley, Oakley and Kingsclear, why is he taking them and not others? Or why all of those? And yes, well, I'm very interested. Well, I've got some 14 parishes on this list.
They're the major settlements, including Tadley.
My final question for now, Chair, and I think it's something that the portfolio holder has already acknowledged, really, but would it not be true to say that you took the decision that you did against officer advice?
Yes, officers have made a different recommendation to us, and for the very reason that I explained earlier, that the north and east of the town have borne the brunt of all the recent development. We thought to even it out and try and be more fair-handed about it.
I think that does me for now, Chair. I'll leave it to the members of the committee.
I'm not saying to the signatories that should we find we've reached an interesting topic that the portfolio is dealing with other members, that you shouldn't have another chance to ask the question, because I think it's very important that you do. But I'm working on the basis you probably won't be inclined to unless something like that arises, all right? So I won't be looking at you unless you wave at me. Right, members, in turn, do your best to see if you can get it all out the way in one go, but I'm not going to say you can't have another go, as I say, for the same reasons, that another member might raise a topic and you think, oh yes, I want to, don't think they've quite dealt with it. But try not to go for repetition, because if you get a clear answer, then you've got a clear answer. So yes, I saw Councillor Mrs Baker, I've seen Councillor Gary Watts, I've seen Councillor Tilbury, Councillor Miller's writing that down. I've got Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Mr James, and we'll see where that takes us. Oh yes, Councillor Dunlop, thank you. So, Mrs Baker, Mrs Tilbury, Gary Watts, and we have Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Miss James, Councillor Dunlop. See where that... Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Sherlock, in your statement of case, you talk about the development recently having been largely to the north and east of Basingstoke. Would you agree that there's also been significant prior development to the south of Basingstoke, i.e. in Hatchwarren and Beggarwood? I've got several questions, so perhaps we could do one.
And once you've got your answer, and if you don't get the answer, ask it differently.
There has been development there, yes.
Right, thank you. So there has been development to the, which I would say is incontrovertibly to the south and west of Basingstoke, as well as the north and east. I wondered if you had calculated with the newfound interest in and importance given to averages, what the average of the 7,700 houses that sites are needed for might be for various settlements in the borough?
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
What I'm asking is the total number of houses required during the plan period. I believe we're aiming at about 7,700, and I wondered if you had considered, on a head of population basis, what the average figure of that distribution should be for various settlements in the borough, because that's the logical follow-on to the newfound interest in averages.
I don't think it is the natural follow-on.
Sorry, can I be clear? So you believe that the historical averages is important, but the future average isn't?
sorry, that's not quite what I was intending to say. What we are doing is using a formula of average that we feel is much more just than what is the ad hoc system of building that's been going on before.
Well, I can tell you that the per head of population average of the 7,700 that you're looking for a settlement with the population that Overton has is 204, not the 305 that you're proposing. So to correct what you regard as a historical injustice, don't you agree you'll be creating a future injustice?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think the members of the public listening here come to the same conclusion as you. Could I ask you, please, at the last full council meeting, did I ask you for the background data on average numbers of houses developed?
Yes, you did, and I apologise that they weren't sent to you straight away, but I had IT problems, which I should have circumvented, and I didn't, and I do apologise for that.
So, like everybody else, I first saw them tonight when we came in here for the meeting. Looking at the data that you've provided us with this evening, has Basingstoke town area delivered average development in the past?
First of all, your previous question about the papers, I understood they were going to be sent. I had them delivered first thing this morning to the officers, and I thought they were going to be distributed then to you. So, out of interest. But your next thing is, I'm not sure of the Basingstoke average.
Well, perhaps I could help you, because that's the bottom line of the table that you've given us. The non-parished area, which, as you'll agree, is 5.46% ICGAs as the development over the last 10 years. And the other paper that you tabled for us this evening quotes that the average growth across the borough is 5.59%. So do you propose that Basingstoke town area should also have a significantly higher than average distribution of the future housing development?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I think we note.
Can I just, Councillor Baker, can I just draw your attention to, in case it focuses your question, you'll see that Chinham Parish Council is down there separately, and one of the great discussions we always keep having is whether Chinham should be counted separately or together. And this document seems to be separate, and Rookstown. So I wonder if anything, because if you've considered that, and if you want to put any questions about that, because if Rookstown and Chinham are added to the Basingstoke figure, what does that mean? Does that mean the growth has been substantially more, or does it not mean it's been substantially more per head of population? I don't know if you've done that mathematics.
No, I haven't had those done those calculations. Could I move on, please, to the issue of some settlements being constrained by their settlement policy boundaries, which I believe you quoted in Kingsclear. At the moment, Overton is also constrained by its settlement policy boundary, is it not?
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you. But then you went on to mention the lack of Category 1 sites restricting development of some settlements. And are these sites not put forward by would-be developers So if sites are put forward by would-be developers, and that is what guides the distribution of housing, except of course it's not anymore, it's on averages. Are you content that the draft plan is essentially developer-led?
No. It will be if we don't get the draft plan through there. And the draft plan at present is definitely not developer-led.
And going back to the issue of settlement policy boundaries, you stated that the way in which settlements that hadn't seen development in the past might be allowed to see some development under the urge to see development dispersed across the borough and averaged across the borough. I believe you said that that was going to be through a review of each of the settlement policy boundaries.
What was decided at the last cabinet meeting was that we would review the settlement policy boundaries, and what that throws up, we will see.
And could you tell me how many houses in the local plan are going to be committed to be developed following the review of the settlement policy boundaries?
No. I can't let you know that.
All right, thank you. That was the end of the chain of questions I have at the moment, Chairman.
So, Mr. Baker, Councillor Tilbury, please. I'll just leave it to you, but remember, no speeches, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Councillor Shark, I'm a bit concerned about this sort of sudden interest in the averages. I mean, do you understand what an average is? The reason I ask is because obviously this is a simplistic average, and obviously if you've got a very large town like Basingstoke with a lot of growth, where they've got lots of flats, you'd expect the percentages to be much higher than it would be, and that's shown by the very small ones there. So a simplistic average across this, it doesn't make any sense. And a simple analogy, if you've got 10 people and you look at their average incomes, the average income of 10 people, 9 of them work for the council cleaning the streets on £15,000 a year, and the other one's Wayne Rooney on £1 million a year.
Get to the question.
The average will be nearly £1 million a year, but the reality is something completely different. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, the next point is, obviously when we look at these averages there, we're talking about some very sort of odd things going on here, aren't we? Because you're suggesting that every place is the same and will grow at an average rate. Well, one of the things that came out in the last census is that Overton had the highest death rate in the borough, for various reasons, largely because there are quite a lot of elderly people there. So obviously the effect of that is, in those 10 years, quite a lot of them have died, and that carries on. So that creates vacancies there. If you've got a newer area like Hatch Warren or Chinham, some of those areas, that they've got a much younger population who will probably stay there and hopefully won't die until they're very old. So that creates a much larger need for more housing in those areas, because this is the problem. This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, building more houses in the area there. Whereas in other areas you start to get a natural renewal going through there, which we're creating vacancies, which is, as Dr. Wardrum pointed out, is why the average household size in Overton has stayed fairly static, whereas in other areas it's either going up or it's dropping dramatically. Is that not the case?
Well, you probably need some new houses to attract some younger people.
Shorter questions, and you can come back quicker.
Yeah,
Go on.
That's the point I'm making. If you've got a lot of elderly people, they're creating a vacancy as they fall off the demographic curve. Whereas in the other areas there, where you've had lots of generally much younger people, they're the areas where you probably need more housing growth, because there are no old people dying, basically. You're doing this the wrong way round. You're not, and that's the point. We're looking at an average. An average is just an average. It's meaningless, which is why officers don't use this system.
And that's all very interesting, but as I said, it's not a question.
I want you to ask questions because that's the process we're in. I know it's difficult, and we all know you. We know you well enough that you like to do it your way. But the problem is I've got members from all different backgrounds muttering about this is a speech, this is and all the rest of it. Try and ask questions because then you can get to it quicker. Because if he says blur and you don't like it, we'll say, well, can you answer it? Just go back. But if it's
I think
3 minutes,
he can't answer it. I think he's not answered my question by not being able to answer it.
yeah, I thought it was Councillor Gary Watts next, actually. Yes, Councillor Gary Watts.
Chair, Councillor Sherlock, in 5.10 on the Cabinet report, it says this is a bottom-up approach. Do you think your decision in Whitchurch and Overton is a bottom-up approach?
No, no, it's not.
So why are we going against this LDF process, which we've adopted the whole long neighbourhood planning bottom-up approach, and at the last moment you've decided you're going to plant some extra houses on now on Whitchurch?
Neighbourhood planning is subservient in the first instance to the strategic planning of the borough, and when they've been agreed, they then carry equal weight. But the neighbourhood plan is of lesser value before.
You need to get the members of the communities in supporting these developments, so you need a bottom-up approach, would be the way I would tackle this.
In an ideal world, I would agree with you, but we've got 7,800 houses to build somewhere, and this committee has completely failed to make any suggestions except for 100 at Swang Lane, and so we have had to come up with a formula to place these houses.
I think it was this committee's job to make site selection. I mean, this council made a decision 17 years ago to buy many down to build some houses there, and we've been sat on that land for 17 years. That's more of a statement. In the report on Whitchurch, it says 343 homes are needed over the next 15 years for local need. So why are you imposing another 200 on top of that with no evidence? Sorry.
Because we have got to find somewhere for all these homes that the borough needs, and they are Category 1 sites in Whitchurch.
Can't understand why you're picking on Whitchurch and not all these other sort of parish areas. I know you said that these are all town areas, towns, but I mean there's only 6 that have over your new criteria have had over that 5.59% increase, but you said they're all different. So I'm slightly confused because some of these areas, like the Candovers, have had nothing, and now you want to impose extra houses on Whitchurch to get up to the average.
Experience proved, if I'm correct, the officers have told me, that they went round all the parishes trying to infill and etc. and encourage more housing, and they came up with about 120 maximum. But we, by readdressing the policy boundaries, we are hoping that we'll be able to create more.
About redrawing the policy boundaries, how long do you reckon that's going to delay this local plan LDF process?
It's not going to delay the plan at all. Wait a minute.
mean, where's the timetable? This is just being sprung on to councillors now. We've gone through this process. This is the second process, and at the final hurdle before we go out to consultation, we come up with a new formula. I mean, that's no way to do business, is it really?
I think it's a perfectly satisfactory way of doing it. In the absence of any other.
About redrawing the boundaries, I think you touched on it with Councillor Baker, that you tend to, Basingstoke on your figures have had less than 5.59, so you're saying there should be more growth within Basingstoke, and also you want to redraw the boundaries in Basingstoke as well, so councillors from within the settlement areas won't have a decision what goes in the local plan, which is the current case at the moment. So is that correct?
No, we said we were going to review all the boundaries, not change them, but we're going to review them.
Which means what? That's a technicality, isn't it? Review them, change them, and you said you want more housing out of Basingstoke because we're not up to your 5.59, and then you're going to redraw the boundaries of the Basingstoke borough as well.
I didn't say we were going to redraw the Basingstoke ones, but they will become part of it, and it's something that will take place over the next year or so.
And misunderstood you, because I thought you said you were going to look at all the settlement boundaries for all these parishes and unparished areas, but now you're not going to look at the one within Basingstoke. You're just going to look to try and impose more housing within the Basingstoke settlement boundaries.
We're trying to do what the residents want us to do, which is to spread the load much fairer and more broadly, I think is the word I'm looking for, more broadly over the borough.
I'm just intrigued that you don't think this is going to delay the process. I mean, you said this is not development driven. If we go through this whole rigmarole of going through everything again onto this criteria, it is going to be development driven because we've got no 5-year land supply. We're at the mercy of the developers at the moment, and we've already got developments coming forward which we have no control over. And this is just going to truncate this whole process even longer. That's
Good evening, Donald. Just trying to clarify something. The committee debated site allocation at great length over, I think it was 3 evenings. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend any one of them, so therefore I was excluded from attending any of them. So I just haven't looked at the entire webcast. But my understanding is that the committee didn't agree and recommend a particular set of site allocations. Is that the case? Sorry.
Yes, that is the case. They just purely, the only one everybody agreed on was 100 houses in Swang Lane.
For that, I'm glad they agreed on something. Did the committee recommend any method or mechanism for selecting sites given any particular housing number that said, well, we can't recommend particular sites, but here's a way of going forward that will arrive at a really good solution? Did the committee come up with a proposition of that nature?
No propositions at all.
So it was rather left to the cabinet to sort this out, was it?
Yes.
Thank you very much. The formula and method that you've now proposed, and which is effectively a major subject for this call-in, was applied in arriving at this particular recommended set of allocations was applied to a proposed housing number of 730 to 770 dwellings per annum, as I understand it. The committee recently had a report and advice from independent experts that recommend a whole series of actions to get a better fix on the number of houses required. You were here, I think. Have you had those recommendations, and are you doing anything about it?
There is further research being done by GBH, no, not GBH, GHV, wasn't it? Edge, and we've instructed them to carry on as I think the committee all agreed to, and we haven't had them yet. No.
And if through that process the number that the particular site allocation we're debating this evening, if through that work the number reduced more than trivially, does that mean that the allocations would be revisited?
Very definitely.
And have you got a handle on how that would be prioritised? And I'm not asking you to give specific answers here because I don't think that's appropriate, but do we have a feel for how the prioritisation would work of, given no other mechanism than the one that you've based this on, and the committee may feel there might be other mechanisms if they ever get around to debating them, but given the mechanism that you've used, do you have any feel for how sites might drop off that, how it could be applied in that way? Because clearly you wouldn't need the same sites.
I haven't, but we'd obviously wait and see, and we'd probably look at the latest sites that have been added on.
One other question for the moment, Chairman, if I may. You've been challenged quite several times about this question of reviewing settlement policy boundaries and how that applies to percentages of development and so forth. And obviously that's something that all councillors outside of the main settlements would be deeply concerned about, and even in the main settlements. And I just want to clarify that. Firstly, my understanding is that officers have not yet proposed, and as far as I can recall, neither the committee nor cabinet has discussed any principles or methods for approaching the review. I'm pretty confident of that because I've asked about it several times and never got an answer.
No, you are correct.
So it's open to this committee through its normal processes to discuss and recommend that, or to wait for an officer report, or something will happen which will, my urging would have been that is clarified well before we make any representations on this to inspectorates. But I can assume that mechanisms and principles will come to this committee at some point.
Absolutely.
And secondly, is it your expectation that officers will recommend, or if they recommended it, the cabinet might accept that, for example, looking at the list of places, a small hamlet deep in the AONB with a population of 100 would be somehow expected to produce some plan, or would have inflicted on it some plan that requires it to catch up in some way with the average percentage development across the borough?
I don't think that would be possible, and I wouldn't predict it. I wouldn't have thought so.
No, thank you. So that when you talk about averages and percentages, you're talking about sensible allocation of housing, which takes into account but isn't entirely determined by the extent to which settlements that can take development have taken development in the past and might be expected to take development in the future. Have I understood that. Thank you.
Ms. James?
Thank you. Can I first ask, in relation to the meeting that we attended in P&I, where it was raised tonight by one of the signatories that we had Councillor Vaughan come along to speak, Reddy and Vaughan, where it was first mentioned about Overton and Whitchurch being able to take further sites. What was the timescale between that meeting and the decision of the Cabinet? What was that timescale?
I think we'd already. I can't remember.
So after the meeting that we had in P&I, when we looked at all the sites over several nights, on that last meeting, you at what point after that night did you and your Cabinet decide on this new formula? How did you decide that?
We'd been discussing it for a long time before that. Riddy and Vaughan stood up and made his speech.
When you say you was discussing it, were you discussing the formula, or were you discussing the possibility of Overton and Whitchurch taking more sites, more houses?
The formula.
So as a committee, when we were looking at all of the sites, you as a Cabinet are already looking at a different formula for determining housing development.
We were discussing, looking at, assuming that we got no instruction or recommendation from the committee, how we would go about it. But it was not as the Cabinet as such. It was just myself and some other members.
Can I ask, who was it? Because earlier on in discussions we've had with other people question, you referred to the Cabinet. Who actually were these people that you referred to?
My colleagues.
Can I just push you a bit more, and can I ask for those names of those colleagues? Do I take it they're councillors, or are you saying they're not councillors?
Colleagues are councillors.
Can I ask you for the names of the councillors that supported you in determining or coming up with this new formula?
They didn't necessarily support me. I asked their advice and took it and went away and did it myself, came up with it myself. So,
who were the councillors that helped you or gave you advice?
actually, I don't think that's relevant. I'm not going to answer it.
As a committee, we were looking at sites and we were looking at a criteria that was before us. You were, with councillors that you won't name, looking at a different formula that we weren't aware of as a committee that would give a different outcome. Is that? But you're not prepared. Can I just be clear? You're not prepared to tell us who those people were.
I'm not prepared, no. And I was just canvassing opinion. We were not actually formulating the formula at the time. It was only subsequent to the final P&I meeting, those excruciating nights of 3 nights that we had, did I then realize we had to come up with an answer. And that's how it came about. So there was no predetermination or things going on before P&I meetings.
Thank you. So, just to be very clear, in agreeing the formula of this that we've got before us tonight, because it's the first time I've seen it, does that mean that each ward will take more houses? Is that what this formula? This is what I'm reading, and I'm struggling to understand it at this stage because it's hard to digest. But is that what that is telling me?
No, they may take less.
Could you maybe go through the formula with me? I know that we've already asked you to do it. Could you try to help me to understand which wards are going to take more and which are not going to take more?
I think I couldn't go through them all now individually, and there are, no, I don't think it's appropriate.
At full council, there were debates about, we had motions and we had questions to yourself, and you mentioned that as a result of the work that's going on, there could be a possible increase in housing, and you said the figure of 9,000. Is that correct? Do you think, as a result of the work that's going to happen, we're going to see an increase in the numbers that is going to move from 760 and it may be greater?
I've no reason on our figures at the moment to think that they're going to increase, or to confirm that they are. I suspect they may. I suspect that certainly all our neighbours, Winchester, West Berks, East Hants, who got thrown out completely, but Winchester were told to build another 1,500 houses. West Berks were told to build 2,000 more, and there seems to have been a return to the southeastern plans, or it's still in existence, the southeast plan in the inspectorate.
Thank you. Under the southeast plan, Whitchurch and Overton, over the whole period of that plan, was going to take a much smaller number. Could you give us some details as to what was planned for that area?
How do you mean, what was planned? What, under the southeast plan? No, I'm not in favour of the southeast plan.
In relation to that southeast plan, what it did say is because of the lack of employment, that Overton and Whitchurch could not accommodate high numbers, and that was protected. Why, under this new formula that you've created, are we going to see a higher number? Do you see that there's going to be more employment in Overton and Whitchurch in the future?
The southeast plan was revoked on Monday, and I had assumed, as everybody else had done, that it would not be referred to again. But it does seem as though the planning inspectorate is still using it as a guideline. But that's as far as I can go. So as far as I'm concerned, I take no notice of the Southeast Regional Plan.
Under the old plan, from 2006 to 2026, we were going to see 600 homes built across the whole of Hampshire, the rest of Hampshire, outside of the town. And we'd already seen 200 homes built. So for Overton and Whitchurch, they were only, I mean, I think Overton was going to see 60 homes built, and I think it was Whitchurch was going to see around 100. So this is going to see, I mean, as that has been revoked, this plan, your new formula is we're going to see a great many houses. The reason why the South East plan said there was not going to develop housing is because there wasn't employment. What is your formula? Why do you see that Overton and Whitchurch can accommodate so many more houses?
What we've said is that Overton and Whitchurch have underbuilt on average compared to like settlements over the last years, and that we intend to make sure that the infrastructure, and we're very strong on this, we are determined for any further building will be put in place properly.
So does that include employment? Are we going to see employment in those areas as well?
Well, I assume so. If we're putting in infrastructure and if we're putting in more houses, that is employment. Everyone would imagine.
I think one of the witnesses, one of the signatories talked about one of the other cabinet members on their webpage, Councillor J.O. Adina, saying that there was no development in Bramley or Sherfield and Loddon. Does that mean that those other two sites that we discussed on the night, Coford and what was the other one? Razors Farm, are not going to come forward?
Yes, they're coming forward.
Does that include the two sites inside Bramley? Are they coming forward?
Yes.
We'll give you the answer. It might, apparently there's some sites within Bramley Village that aren't coming forward, which is, I think, is the point you're getting to. But the sites that you've referred to, Cufford Lane, Razor Farm, which are in Bramley Parish, are in the thing. So whoever's saying there is no development in Bramley either is being inaccurate or is referring to the village as opposed to the parish. But Councillor Leake, okay, I'm sorry, I've taken this off, Peter.
I just want.
I mean, that's what the report seems to say. I mean, we've all read it, haven't we?
Chairman, could I just, I think that your statement may be incorrect. If there was a neighbourhood plan for Bramley, then those two sites could be included in Bramley. So they could come forward, not as you just said.
Thank you. Emily, I understand that, because there's been a change to the travel of this document, the local plan, through the council, and in talking to officers and asking about the changes, I understand that it goes now to Cabinet, who will recommend to council in July before it then goes out for adoption. Do you think when you bring this forward as a Cabinet to council in July with your recommendation that council are going to support this document with the new formula?
Mr. James, sorry to interrupt you. Keep your question in mind. I'm just going to ask one of the officers to remind us what the procedure is, and then you'll ask the question in the right way, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair. At the point of housing numbers being clarified, it's the draft local plan will go out for consultation. So there's a consultation exercise prior to that then being reported back to council for a second time before it's then submitted for examination.
No.
I've had written response from Andrew in this, which is not that is not correct.
Answer.
Just in terms of the cabinet decision sets out that the
pre-submission local plan, so we're all used to that term, would go through the cabinet, through P&I to cabinet, and prior to public consultation, it would go through council as a sign-off, and then you would, depending on the changes that were needed to be made to the plan after consultation, it would either go back through council or it could be just submitted.
Was the council meeting it's going to, is that the end of July currently for the first time?
That was when it would go, if subject to what happens with this before consultation. That's correct. Yeah, that's.
Go.
I know my timetable. So
Adoption or something, but you didn't mean that. You
Okay.
mean what you now mean. Right, go on.
So it comes up to us as to the council. Now, what do you think your chances are of us 60 councillors all supporting this with this new formula? Are you concerned that we will support this? And if we don't support it, what then will happen to this? Will it go out for consultation without our support as councillors? Or can it go out for support without our support?
I'm not sure what that situation is. I certainly hope we will support it when it comes to it.
But if we can't, what happens then?
Yeah, well, it has to go back for processing. It'll have to come back to P&I again. Well, I assume. I can't give you a definitive answer to that. Mr. Hunter may be able to help.
In relation to housing need, and I think it was picked up with Gary, that he talked about Whitchurch, and there was a figure, I'm not sure what he said, it was around 350 housing need for Whitchurch. What we're building is greater than the need, and you said that was for the rest of the borough. Where are those people in the borough going to come from to live in Whitchurch?
Everywhere. I can't predict where people are going to move to and from. I can't even predict whether the figures that we're predicting will be fulfilled. For instance, this year we're not going to build the same amount of houses as we did the previous year.
So, in relation to the assessment of need, it's not for local people, it's not for Whitchurch, it's a greater need, it's not for just the local community of Whitchurch. We're building houses in Whitchurch for other people to live in.
To a degree, you're always doing that because Basingstoke, as a borough, has a large migration, inward migration from within the UK.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sherlock, as the cabinet member, I'm looking in these questions for your thoughts and your process of reaching the decisions that you've reached. The Constitution says that the decision on the local plan and the decision on the housing numbers is an executive decision. It's your decision as the cabinet member, but you've obviously consulted others. It's very relevant to this proceeding that we understand how you reached your decision. So who were the other councillors that helped you reach that decision?
I'm not prepared to say because actually I purely asked them more in passing and there was no committee or anything formal like that, and I don't think that as far as I'm concerned it's come from me, and from me it's come.
But it's very important for any inspector who might look at this process, from anybody who might challenge this process, that they understand who has influenced you and shaped your view in reaching a decision. And I'd like to know who has assisted you in making that decision.
No, the decision stands as it is. And the cabinet, if it's agreed by the cabinet, it's agreed by the cabinet, and the cabinet take responsibility.
Thank you. So on that basis, we as a committee passed comment in the January meetings that you chose to ignore as a cabinet. So what was the decision-making process you went through that disagreed with this committee's comments to you and disagreed with the representations that people from Whitchurch and Overton made in those January meetings?
Forgive me, but I don't think we went against any recommendation from this.
This committee didn't make any recommendations. They passed comment to you, and then you made the recommendation. You made the decision as the executive. So why did you make a decision as the executive that disagreed with the comments of this committee and the representations that this committee had from members of the public from Whitchurch and Overton, and for that matter, other areas of Basingstoke and Deane? What decision process did you go through? Why did you choose to ignore these comments from this committee? Why did you choose to ignore the representations from the rest of Basingstoke and Deane?
You've got to make a decision somewhere along the line, and we took a view, and we can't. We didn't ignore them. We took them into account. But you can't please everybody all of the time, can you?
But that decision also disagreed with officers. So how do you disagree with the officers in that respect?
The officers aren't always right, and we took a view that we would do it differently, and we hoped more fairly and justly, and spread the load of housing across the borough.
The aspiration is interesting. I'm interested in your evidential basis for that. So you chose to take an officer recommendation of this committee and change it, the comments of this committee and ignore it, the comments of residents and ignore them. Where is your evidential base for Whitchurch being able to take 200 more units as inward migration as compared to any other settlement or area of Basingstoke, particularly when you agreed that Bramley didn't need to and could carry on with a neighbourhood plan of its own?
In the National Homes Survey, 59% of the people wanted a broader-based house-building programme across the borough.
Well, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in your decision-making process, because that's what will come under scrutiny at an examination in public. So why did you choose to do that, and where is your evidential base to disagree with the officers and disagree with the members of the public, and for that matter, this committee when we met over those 3 long nights?
The members of the public who were here came from Overton and Whitchurch. If we'd said we wanted another 300 houses in Bramley or in Norden or wherever, we would have had the same amount of people probably making exactly the same arguments, and somewhere the line has to be drawn.
It's just interesting that the former councillor who came along that evening and made a recommendation that he felt that Bramley shouldn't, but Overton and Whitchurch should, is then almost the interpretation that you see in the cabinet papers. I still don't understand, and you still haven't told me, where is your evidential base? What are you basing your decision on that you took at cabinet for changing the view of the officers to recommend more in Whitchurch and more in Overton? Where's your evidential base? What is it? What can you point to in anything that justifies that decision on an evidential basis?
The amount of building that's taking place in the north and east, and the unfairness of it, and the even more strident objections that have been coming from that area. And
can I just clarify then? So are you saying that those shout the loudest get off easiest? Is that exactly what you're saying? Well, that's exactly what the
Please don't shout.
Can I be absolutely clear for the public record? Councillor Sherlock, you have just said that you chose Whitchurch and Overton because people from the east and the north were shouting louder. Do you stand by that statement? You just said that publicly.
I did not use those words, A, and B, people shouting doesn't necessarily win the day. And we know the River Loddon has got a problem with water and waste and such like, and we were trying to make it a fairer spread across the borough, which is what we've been asked to do by the majority of residents.
Thank you. I mean, the transcript will show exactly what you said, and that will be played back, and those words will be recorded for all posterity because they're going to be used at the EIP. And I think that's incredibly important. Can I ask you then, if you're saying about spreading the development more broadly across the borough, 200 more in Overton, 200 more in Whitchurch, and the extra that you potentially, we need to tease out the bit about Overton because, you know, where is Overton now with its numbers? The bit I don't understand is why then Chinham is taking 2,000 more. So we're piling it on an area that you're saying shouldn't have more, but it's nearly 2,000 units. It's an MDA you're talking about in the northeast. And yet you're justifying development in Whitchurch because you don't want to put it in the northeast. You're going to put, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any logical, coherent sense. So I still don't understand, and you still haven't told me, where is your evidential base, your planning base, not your hypothesis of just sharing it around to be more fair. Where is your actual evidence base as the cabinet member for disagreeing with the officers and changing their recommendation to you, and disagreeing with the comments we passed at committee?
I think I go back to the behind my reasoning is the spreading of the load amongst everyone, amongst the various settlements. I think that's what the residents want, and the people of Whitchurch and Overton may not. But that's everybody's. The people of Kingsclere, if we put 200 in there, wouldn't be too pleased either. So wherever you go, somewhere you've got to put these houses, and we know that the government are hell bent on building more. And I've got to find somewhere for them, and that is the way we chose.
But I'm trying to understand how you chose. And what I can't understand at the moment, and what you're not telling me, is, okay, you've made this decision and aspiration to be fair, but it has to be based in planning. There has to be real planning reasons why you chose and why you think that the figure of 200 more is appropriate for Whitchurch. It could be 300, it could have been 100. No, you chose 200. So quite specifically, why those sites are justifiable. Not simply because they're Category 1 sites, because the officers had discounted them through the SHLA and through other evidential base that they created, but you disagreed with that. You said, no, these should go forward. So I still don't understand, and I do need you to tell me this, I really do, because this decision can't stand if you don't, why you and where you get your evidential base from to justify the decision. Why 200?
Because then those are the numbers that we needed to find.
Why was it 200? Why did you need to find 200? Where did that come from?
The north and east, and there was more than that. We have got to find if Overton 007 comes out of it. We had an allocation there of 35, and I've got to readjust that somewhat. But I will wait for that until we've got the census figures back and we know what the grand total is, because it's still work in progress. So we may change a lot.
What I was going to say is, if you feel you haven't got an answer, we can all evaluate whether you're right about that at the debate.
Oh, I appreciate it. Well, my follow-up question was
I'm not
going
to stop you. Just remember, if you keep knocking on the door and you don't get no answer,
I'm not going to go back to that one. I'm still going to go back to that one. I wanted to pick up on what the cabinet members just said. So you took the 200 from the north and the east. Where in the north and the east did you take them from? Where can I look to in the plan to see that went from there to there, and I have a logical sequence of your decision making? So where did you take the 200 from?
Bramley?
So Councillor Vaughan's representation to the committee, former Councillor Vaughan, oh god, that was a Freudian slip, former Councillor Vaughan, he lost his seat, didn't he, interestingly, over the issues. He came along as a member of the public and recommended that you take away the 200. So did you listen to him and actually make a decision based on that then?
We'd already made the decision, or we were considering it.
So we'd already made the decision. So when did you make the decision? When were you considering it then?
I regret to say I was using the royal we, which I apologise for. I was considering the decision, and anyway, because we were trying to do this, we were trying to work out this, and that was the obvious place to alleviate, to give a break to the north and east.
So on that basis, then you were considering it over those P&I meetings. Did it go back before then? When did that kind of thought start to happen, and who were you having it with?
About after the second P&I meeting, I started thinking, when you kept sympathising with me for having the job, and you said you will be left to make the decisions, and I thought, well, I am going to be left to make the decision, so I must do something about it, and so I did. And I just in passing asked one or two of my colleagues, and that's as far as it goes.
When did you start having those discussions with the officers about that thought?
I can't remember when we told the officers.
When we told the officers, so it was a collective of you again that was thinking these thoughts through, and you shared those thoughts with those people that you were getting advice from?
No, sorry, royal we again.
So you can't remember when you really shared that with the officers. It's important, I think, if you could, but I appreciate if you can't remember when you shared it with the officers.
I can't, but I'm sure that they will know.
And it's important because the cabinet meeting was due to take place on the 12th of the month following, and we had all those meetings in January, so we then had the cabinet postponed to the 28th. So you had quite a lot of time to think about it, didn't you? Really a long time between the P&I meetings and then you making the kind of decision toward the end of February.
I don't think there was all that long a time.
It's a whole month.
Maybe I'm a slow thinker.
So if that was the case, and this is the important thing, if you were having those thoughts and you were having all those considerations, why is it that other councillors and ward members in particular only found out about your thinking less than a week before the cabinet meeting, and actually after the postponed cabinet meeting? So actually on the 28th, there was a very few days' notice before they actually saw what the changes that you'd made. So if you were having those thoughts, why didn't you consult those ward members, and why didn't you tell others that those were quite a radical change of thought you were having?
I'm not sure I'd call it quite radical change of thought. Yes, I can appreciate that. But no, I think. Because it wasn't policy at the time, and it hadn't been finalised or formalised.
Okay, so you're having these thoughts around the P&I meeting. When do they become crystallised as your decision? When do you actually say, right, that's the decision I'm making?
I don't keep a diary of my thoughts, I'm afraid.
Chair, I'll come back. I'm going to leave it there for the moment.
Unlock, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Sherlock, I'd like to draw your attention, if I may, to the proposed Whitchurch site in Whitchurch, WIT 010A. were you aware that the proposed 200 houses to go on that site, that all of the traffic generated from that site would be fed through Daniel Road, which is only 7 metres wide, and the only way that that road could be widened is to seriously demolish a lot of the front gardens of the houses going down through to Alliston Way?
I am aware that there are problems with access. Mrs. Katie, sorry, sent me a photograph of her house, and with lines, and I'm afraid we will come to that. The assessments are still being done, and when the assessments come back from officers, we may rejig the whole thing again.
Thank you for that. I would like to remind you that Mrs. Cady is living near the other site, which is Whitchurch 018, which is to the south of Whitchurch, and the concern that I have for Whitchurch 10A is for the people which are living in Daniel Road and subsequently those along Alliston Way, because all this feeds out onto Mitcheldecker Road, which already is a bottleneck. So can I ask you, has there been a traffic survey carried out of this particular area?
No, officers are actively engaged in that now. They're doing traffic assessment of all the sites.
Thank you very much. That's the end of my question.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, if I may, and then we'll come to Councillor Mrs. Baker afterwards. Okay. Councillor Sherlock, can you help me with this? In the original report, is it right, and I'm looking at paragraph 5.9, which is on page 23, members of our papers, that the officers recommended an approach for site selection which was a Basingstoke focus and a spreader development to larger settlements in the borough. Is that right?
Sorry, your question was?
Is it right the officers recommended a Basingstoke focus and a spreader development to larger
Yes.
settlements in the borough as their recommendation?
Yes.
Is it right that P&I committee, with the exception of Councillor Tilbury, endorsed that approach?
Yeah. Yes.
And is it right that you've adopted it?
Yes.
Right. And is that as it were, the starting point of the adjustments to the figures from, say, Bramley or Kingsclear or to Kingsclear, because there is an adjustment to Kingsclear, isn't there? No, I thought it was more over an expectation.
Yeah,
And that's the starting point for the adjustment you've made, is it?
Yes.
Right, within that context. Now can I ask you another question? Can you help me with this? The issue for the residents of Whitchurch, and the issues for any community, but Whitchurch town in particular, is this, is it not? Whether it can absorb either 350 houses in 15 years or 550. Is that right?
Yes.
Which do you think an inspector will give higher regard to? A decision to increase the growth based upon the average house building rate in the past, or whether the community can absorb the growth in the future?
I hope the latter.
So if that's right, any policy based upon average house building in the past is irrelevant, isn't it? It's got to be determined on whether a community can absorb it in the future.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some further questions which have come up from questions other councillors have raised. I just want to be sure, did I hear correctly, Councillor Sherlock, that you were not au fait with the South East plan?
I haven't had much experience of it.
But it was only revoked on Monday, so it was still there until Monday.
Carry on, Councillor, Mr. Baker. You have the floor. Carry on.
Thank you. But you do agree that it was still there in place until Monday of this week?
Yes, albeit supposedly dead 2 years ago.
Thank you. I wanted to explore a bit further the issue of neighbourhood planning. Could you confirm that on page 135 of the papers that we have here, which is the supplementary report to Cabinet for the 28th of February, on page 135, para 111 says that officers have considered the views expressed with regard to Bramley, Overton and Whitchurch and are of the view it would be appropriate for a neighbourhood plan approach to be applied to Overton should the parish council wish to pursue this option. Paragraph 111.
Sorry, I was distracted as chairman. I was muttering. Go on. Where were you? Which paragraph?
Paragraph 111, about halfway down page 135. Officers have considered the views expressed with regard to Bramley, Overton and Whitchurch and are of the view it would be appropriate for a neighbourhood plan approach to be applied to Overton should the parish council wish to pursue this option in replacement for the identification of site of 004.
Yes.
And I will forgive you if you're not aware of the fact, but the Overton Parish Council has taken up that option and is currently in the consultation period for the site boundary of a neighbourhood plan. And I'm sure you are aware because we've heard one of the witnesses here this evening, one of the members of the public here this evening, quoting to you from the well-received village design statement that was previously done by Overton.
Yes, I'm aware of it.
Then can I ask you to turn please to page 153, which is additional recommendations from the portfolio holder to the Cabinet meeting, where you say of neighbourhood development plans, these plans are at an embryonic stage and it may be unsound to place too great a reliance on their eventual outcome. And you then go on to propose instead specific allocations. Could you please tell us what your evidence was for that statement that it may be unsound? Page 153 of your own report to the additional recommendations from you to Cabinet, it's para 1 little b. and if it's helpful, it's your statement. It may be unsound to place too great a reliance on their eventual outcome. And what I'm asking you is please could you tell us what your evidence was for that statement?
Regards Overton, I had been informed that Overton had decided against having a neighbourhood plan. And subsequently, that didn't prove correct, or Overton changed its mind.
Your statement does specify for Bramley, Overton, and Whitchurch. So it wasn't just can't just surely be an uncertainty about whether Overton were going to proceed with the neighbourhood plan.
And at the time, I think neighbourhood plans were a very unknown quantity and were very new off the stock, so to speak, and so we couldn't rely on them. Hence the expression "unsound."
So that is exactly opposite to the view of our officers in the previous paper, in the paragraph I just drew to your attention. Is that correct?
Yes, having read them both, yeah.
So what I'm trying to get at is the officers prepared a report suggesting neighbourhood planning, and in a supplementary report to the same meeting, you said that you believed them to be unsound, so surely you had some evidence to base that on.
We said they could be unsound. As I say, they were untried and untested, and they'd only just been launched by the government on us. So we were dealing with an unknown quantity, and we couldn't rely on it.
But the officers felt that we could rely on those, and presume. But I'll have the opportunity to ask questions about that. So purely because of their relative newness, your view was the opposite view of our officers, that they could make the plan unsound.
Many villages and settlements have decided not to have them, and don't rely on them, or are not intending to rely on them. And as I say, we understood Overton was not going to, for instance, was not going to have one. But I'm delighted that they are.
Yes, they certainly are. But also in your supplementary report, you believe they would be all right for Kingsclear and Oakley. Is that correct?
We treated them all exactly the same.
I'm sorry, Councillor Sherlock. I think I'm confused there. Could you explain how that is treating them exactly the same?
We felt when they first came out, as I said, that we couldn't rely on them until they'd moved on a bit and become more in being, so to speak.
Now I am convinced. I am totally confused. So in the same paper that you presented as your supplementary paper to Cabinet, you're saying that they would be unsound for Bramley, Overton and Whitchurch, but you are recommending that that approach should be used in Kingsclear and in Oakley, and also that there should be an allowance for an unspecified neighbourhood plans in other settlements for 300 homes. I'm struggling to work out how one approach is sound and the other approach is unsound, and I'm really looking to you to help us all on that.
As I've said, Well, I mean, we're not talking about next year. We're talking about 15 years hence or 10 years hence, by which time the 300 we are hoping that these neighbourhood plans will have formulated and be active then, and that we will be able to use them for dispensing more housing throughout the borough, as I've said before.
Oh, right. So these proposals for Kingsclear and Oakley and the 300 homes in other settlements aren't actually for this plan. They're for a future plan, are they?
No, for the plan that takes effect from 2019 to 2029, 2015. Sorry.
Right. But not for Bramley, Overton or Whitchurch. No, you've not managed to help me work out why those two statements, those paragraphs in your paper, aren't direct contradiction of each other. And I suspect you may not. So could I perhaps move us on and ask about railways? The papers that went to our earlier meetings of the committee do state that in Bramley and Overton and Whitchurch, one of the facilities that each of those settlements enjoy is that they have a railway station. And you contend that having a railway station is quite an important factor and perhaps makes a settlement more sustainable and more able to cope with future development?
It's a bonus.
It's interesting that only, according to the 2011 census, of the people from Overton who travelled to work, in spite of the fact that we have a station, only 10% travelled by train. And the other 75% all travel by by car. Do you see that situation being likely to change in the future?
I wouldn't have thought so. I couldn't comment on that.
I think the committee has heard and heard not only this evening, but from members of the public who spoke to the Mammoth Triple Session P&I meeting, that there was a significant infrastructure deficit in Overton for access to the station and parking at the station. Do you envisage that being part of the infrastructure package that might be necessary to mitigate future development?
As I've said, the transport assessment is being done at present by officers for each and every site, so Overton will be tested as well. And the car parking, which I'm very familiar with, not to get there after 10 o'clock now, will be part of the assessments that we get back.
Were you aware that there had been promises for improvement to the parking at Overton Station in the past when currently built out housing sites were being proposed, and those promises have not materialised?
I wasn't aware of that there were, but I understood that the parking is courtesy of De La Rue, isn't it?
Yes, but those promises were made and they haven't materialised yet. I noticed that you don't like arriving there after 10 o'clock, and for anyone who doesn't know the train timetables, that must mean that you're planning to catch the 10:20, so 20 minutes before. Have you ever tried catching the normal rush hour trains, the sort of 8 o'clock in the morning ones?
You can put it succinctly like that.
Yes.
It's a pickle. It's a disaster. The trains are full. Whatever it is, just put it briefly, because the queue is getting longer as you broaden out onto wider and broader subjects, and I'm quite keen to just keep us moving along faster than the trains.
I would like you to be aware that the trains are full, and that there is no prospect of getting additional trains on the line into Waterloo, and if you could, there aren't enough platforms in Waterloo, and I don't believe that the kind of SIL or other infrastructure contributions that the council can achieve is likely to reduce congestion on the main Exeter to London railway line. Do you?
Thank you, Chairman. I just say how I envy your relatively slight exposure to the South East Plan. But presumably, since it's been quoted in many officer reports, and since officers have consistently cited it as in some way material to our plan process, you are familiar with the number that was set out in the house, the housing number that was set out in the house. I'm not asking you to quote it, but you are aware of it. Thank you. And presumably, like me, you read with interest the very useful summaries in the recent report from our critical friends, where they revealed the consistent way in which inspectors have routinely ignored the government's announcement that the South East Plan would be revoked.
I have.
Given all that, will you be prepared to support and encourage the Cabinet and Council to support a local plan based on our own local and carefully researched conclusion as to the right numbers when we get to that point, and types and location of housing in our borough, even if that isn't the number that was proposed by the South East Plan?
Yes.
Very pleased to hear it. And in that case, can I ask that you, because this is highly relevant to all this question of where the houses go, how many that we are in the end required to allocate for those residents here tonight, will you ask the leader, if you aren't the right person, to write to the Secretary of State with copies to all our local members of Parliament, seeking assurance that the Inspectorate will consider our plan on its merits, and on the basis of our much more recent evidence and calculations, and not require us to take account of the South East Plan number, which was more or less, because I have had to live with the damn thing, more or less plucked out of the air, and based on such very, very now dated information. Will you pick that up with your Cabinet colleagues?
Very definitely. And there is a site under the local government agency where you can protest about the planning inspectorate and suggesting they get reined in by the government.
Good. I do hope that you will follow through on that, because I think all members would like us to see our plan based on what we think is right for our residents, and even assuming we can't all come to the same conclusion about where the houses go. The final thing I was going to ask about is the question was raised about the South East Plan treatment of Overton and Whitchurch, with which I'm extremely familiar, because I once went to a meeting in Overton when somebody was banning about the idea of 500, I think it was, houses then for Overton, to reassure them that the South East Plan protected them from any such thing. But are you aware of the fact that it wasn't to do with lack of employment in the area, it was to do with it being outside of a very crude line drawn on a map, for which we always kept asking the South East Plan authors what was the basis of this line, where exactly did it run, was it in the middle of King's Clear? Are you aware of that as the background to the lack of attention to housing in Overton and Whitchurch that emerged through that process?
No, it wasn't.
Right, members, I want to just pause for a moment. It's 26 or 27 minutes past 9. I'm not going to be encouraging you to suspend standing orders because we're not going to finish this tonight. It's bank holiday weekend, and I am concerned that the officers and the members of the public and ourselves, we could just keep going on to 10 o'clock to 10:30. I reckon that some of you might want to keep asking Councillor Sherlock questions for at least another hour. And that means that the signatories just will not get to their witnesses. And I'm not keen to encourage you to do that. However, whilst we're still here, we need, if you, first of all, I will hear from you, Councillor Watts, but we'll need to make a decision if you agree with that, whether we should adjourn now, or whether we should slog it out for a bit longer. And secondly, can I say to you, members, that it's very important that whatever meeting we have, all of you remain present. And I know the officers have talked about trying to reconvene this meeting if we should go over to Tuesday or Wednesday next week, and I've also heard that some members weren't even aware of that. Other members are saying, well, for goodness sake, if the one week we're going to go away over Easter, it's next week, not this week. And I think that's going to cause some members a difficulty. I'm also aware of the other problems that officers are away, either next week or the week after, who may be witnesses for the signatories. And I'm also aware that we end a run-up to an election when we generally try not to meet. So can I just hear from Councillor Watts first of all, because if he wants to just say anything about that. But if you're not careful, we'll have to suspend standing orders just to discuss this. That's why I brought us sooner. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock.
I will say something on that, but I thought I caught your eye while Councillor Sherlock was answering questions from Mrs. Baker about neighbourhood planning, and I was going to ask him if he was really saying that
You're not going to do it. I have Councillor Tilbury, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Keys-Watts and Councillor Harvey in a queue. So don't ask him any questions now, because we're not doing that. We are discussing if we're going to carry on or not. So members, I want to hear from you. Do you want to carry on or do you want to adjourn?
As I've got the mic, I agree with you. We're not going to stay here. I think the members of the public now understand the phrase excruciating meeting. So we do need to set a new date when we expect all parties to be.
Can I have a date, please? Right. Well, members, I've been given a magic list of dates here, and can I ask that we suspend standing orders for 5 minutes, please? Yes. And then we'll do it again in 5 minutes, just to keep us on the toes. The officers can make the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th of April. That is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week, which is definitely not going to be on a Friday night. And the 9th and the 11th, that's the following week, the two officers called by the signatories cannot attend. That's the 9th and the 11th. No, that week I think is the answer. The week that it begins the 8th, they cannot attend. Is that right? I'm getting nods, shakes, and nods. Yes, that week. That week's out. And the following week is is part of the 3-week period that runs up to an election, as the Constitution says, rather than the local borough elections. So it's either yeah.
It is the election.
Yes. Yes, well, I'm afraid we do have a returning officer. So it's going to have to be the week after that, isn't it? Yes. Sorry, council. This that week, because, we might have council selection or something going on.
What I was asking is, in relation to my questions to the councillor earlier about the timetable for this coming back to us, it's coming back to us, and I'm not sure when it comes back to P&I, then it goes to council cabinet in June. How will that affect, because we can't obviously go forward with that, so
it slows things down, obviously.
Just can I be absolutely clear what it does, so you can. So our local plan will not be.
As we sit next week, our local plan will be slowed down. Up who can't sit next week, first of all? It's 1, 2. Which day? Well, firstly, Tuesday. Who can't sit on Tuesday? 3, 4. I think it's rather unfortunate, isn't it? And Wednesday, I'm not inclined to. Yes, we bring it back in as soon as possible after the May election, I'm afraid. Councillor Ms. James?
In agreeing that, I'd quite like to know what that does in relation, in agreeing that date from Andrew, what it does in relation to the slippage of, because I can't support that if we're going to.
Essentially, it means that some of the testing that we're doing in terms of transport we can't progress, so we can do some of the scenarios, but we wouldn't be able to do the finalising testing of that, so that wouldn't take place till after May, which then pushes on some of the decisions we've got to make in terms of formulating the whole of the core strategy. So I would see this would give us about a 2-month drop back in the timetable.
From my own part, if it was one councillor from whichever party, I think we'd all be saying as a committee, but if it's at least 3, from whoever it is, I think that's unfair. I mean, if it was you and Councillor Harvey, you'd be jumping up and down saying it'd be unfair.
Just want to clarify whether it's a can't sit or a won't sit. It's a can't sit or a won't sit.
I think it's can't, otherwise they wouldn't have said it, isn't it?
Well, I was conscious of hearing somebody say, I won't sit.
Well, I don't know. 7th of May would be the date, otherwise. Councillor Mitchell?
I was just going to say, Chairman, if it drifts any further, we have to be very conscious of the fact that on the 16th of May, we have the selection meeting, and you may finish up with different members on the PI committee, and you may need to get agreement that the same members will sit then for continuity, because it might go on, at the pace we've been making, it could go on for 3 sessions, so that we need continuity. You'd have to think about and get agreement that the same members would sit, even if they were no longer on P&I as a result of the selection meeting.
Harvey?
Considering what you've said about the timetable being put back, considering that we have appeals pending, that we have planning applications pending, we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, what is the reason that we couldn't sit next Thursday the 4th?
Nothing as far as I'm concerned. holiday period. For some people,
I accept that. I'm just very, very conscious of what we are doing or what is being proposed in terms of pushing it back as far as mate. And I also challenged the point about PERDA because this authority is not in election. Others are. And I personally, despite the interpretation of the legal officer, which I respect, we've no reason why we could not continue the meeting. We're not seeking to create a new meeting. It is an adjournment of this meeting, at least during the week beginning the 15th, to try.
yeah. Let me read it to you because I think we're going to listen to what we've just been suggested to us. During the period of 3 weeks, can we extend standing orders and say till 1:45, please? During the period of 3 weeks before an election, formal meetings dealing with non-urgent matters shall be avoided, and the council's meeting calendar adjusted accordingly. Now, there's two things there. Firstly, this is the borough's code of conduct, so it doesn't specify an election, but one might automatically think that it applies to the borough elections first. With that, it doesn't actually say, but just supposing it goes further than that. Formal meetings dealing with non-urgent matters. Well, it can't get more urgent than this. Yes. Well, no. So exactly. My view is that this is urgent.
Yes.
The only decision to be taken shall be those which have been agreed on a cross-party basis as being urgent. Are we all in agreement that this is urgent? Cross-party?
Yes.
Yes, we've got people here from all different groups. Good. All political parties shall sign up to a protocol that no political capital will be made out of such urgent decision makings. Well, I think you've been very good so far. Any necessary publicity following such urgencies will be strictly factual and non-political. Well, look, we haven't got a local election. I think what we'll ask is the Chief Executive to advise us on all of this in the meantime. But can we set the meeting for the week commencing the 15th of April, please? Sometime. Which date? Right. Monday the 15th. Is it? Right. Okay. Well, that's one. I'm not going to. Yes. Whole week. Right. Let's. How many rooms? Yes. Yes. There won't be any council meetings.
Yes, absolutely.
On the 15th of April.
Which is
Okay. Let's do that. Who can make the 15th of April if it's a Monday? Just who can make the Monday the 15th? Who can't make the 15th? One. Right. We're going to do it. Try and do it fairly. Not by proportional representation, but no. Let's see. Who can do the Tuesday? Yes.
There's a Many-Down member advisory panel on the Tuesday.
Okay. Is the development control on the Wednesday? No. Who can do the Wednesday? There's one. Who can't do the Wednesday? 3. Okay. Who can't do the Tuesday? Sorry. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I see. Who can't do the Thursday? 3, 4. And we're not doing Friday, are we? No, because we're back where we are. Well, Monday has 2 down. That's one of each. Well, I know, but we're trying not to be political, but it is one of each party. Of 2 parties. Yes, but Overton's not really in the call-in now, is it? Apart from on the neighbourhood plan issue, which you're quite capable of dealing with, aren't you? And you have got Councillor Tilbury here to fight Overton's corner.
And I did.
He's quite capable of saying enough for both of you.
And I did hear Councillor Sherlock towards the end of our discussions this evening, and we'll see this on the webcast and on the transcription, that he did go back to referring to if Overton 007 drops out.
Not an if, we've been told it is. It's a definite, so, well, right.
I will give apologies to the meeting I was committed to on that evening, so that I can attend.
Oh, it's in the council chamber. Well, there we are. We don't like that really, but there we go. We'll do it. Monday the 15th, 6:30, in the council chamber, members. Thank you. And that's the meeting adjourned until that's... DC's a Wednesday normally. Yes. It's always Wednesday. Yeah, that's a Monday. Members, just so we're clear, there can be no substitutions for those who are away on that day. And I think it's only fair to say that if a member if we go off from there onto another day, I don't think a member should come back, sadly. Because I think they will have missed out on a key part of it. So there we go. Monday the 15th, I adjourn the meeting until then. Thank you all.